March 26, 1976.
We got to salute one great athlete here. We just got a note here in the news in Holyoke, Mass. Fantastic. No, Holyoke, Maine. Just tremendous. Holyoke, Maine. Yeah, I didn't know there was a Holyoke, Maine. But anyway, in Holyoke, Maine, there's a guy named Robert Bubeck, and he's in the hospital. He's recovering well. He's doing quite well. What happened was that he suffered a few superficial injuries when he stood up from his bar stool, sneezed, a fantastic sneeze, and fell backwards through a plate glass door. That brings up a whole new ball game in my thinking here. I'm hearing that guy sneeze like that. Did you know that in Peru, Indiana? Now I spent some time in my early life living in the state of Indiana. Did you know that in Peru, Indiana? Lee, don't run around. I'm talking to you now. You're not listening. Did you know that in Peru, Indiana, I can always tell when she's not listening. Do you know that? I really can. You can't fool me. Do you know that in Peru, Indiana, that in the spring of the year, they have the annual sneezing contest. It is an actual competition among local sneezers to come and sneeze. Now, it's very objective. I mean, you can't really judge a sneezer on the basis of how far he falls backward or how many windows he breaks at sneezing. But actually, it is subjective. In other words, they have a team of judges who judge the most spectacular sneeze. It falls in several categories: the most spectacular, the most explosive, the most creative, and the juiciest. Those are the categories in which competition is performed. Now, I'm not kidding you. They actually have this. You're listening. You're probably saying, oh, yeah. But it's really great, and people used to come from, hundreds of miles around to watch these really great sneezers. You know, some people can sneeze at will. Did you know that? A great sneezer can. And a lot, if they can, and a lot of us can't, I'm the kind of guy who one time, for an entire 6-month period, I was really bugged because, have you ever had this experience, you're walking along, and all of a sudden you feel a tickling, the tickling in the nose, and you feel a sneeze coming on. And then it disappears. Then it comes back, and then it disappears. And you can't get the damn thing out. For 6 months, I kept nursing a sneeze, trying to get it out. And what was worse was that I was sitting in this elegant restaurant with this girl. 6 months this sneeze has been hiding around in the back of my ear there. And suddenly, without even any warning, it came out totally without any... involuntarily, like that, and the soup flew up, and it was all over the front of this girl, and I knocked over the fern plant, and it was really embarrassing. But so I can't control the sneeze. I cannot control a sneeze. Other people can, and I have had terrible times when I have been able to, Now, my brother is the other type. My brother makes me bug. He can do all this stuff. Have you ever had somebody in your family who could do stuff that you couldn't even remotely approach? From the age of 5, my kid brother could actually move his ears. He could wiggle his ears about 1.5 inches. I mean, he wiggles them like a donkey. I don't even, most people get a little... He can actually wiggle his ears. They go up and down. And so I realized immediately when I was about 8 or 9, I realized immediately that Randy had a fantastic talent. Really, no way I could come near this. And he can do it without moving his face or anything. Most people get that scrunched up look and they struggle. And he could move those ears back. He could move his ears as easy as he could move his foot, His ears go up and down. So from about the time he was maybe 8 or 9, I began to train him. And I was training him in moving his ears separately. And by the time he was 14, he could move both of his ears separately or one singly. Try that. Randall would, for example, my brother would sit in a class, and he could cause the entire class to lose its cool, and to lose its basic cohesion. He sits in the back there, see, and then he starts slowly to move his ears in a circular fashion. And he could move them in a circle, so then he could flick one at a time, and you could hear the teacher lose the train of what she was saying. She's saying, and now if we take up the principal exports of Peru, I was speaking of the principal, and his ears, he's not doing it, he's just sitting there listening, but his ears are moving, see? And he used to do great things like that, and I always really envied him for that. Now, on the other hand, Bolus, for example, Bolus was my friend, and Bolus, I had in the group of friends I had this one Polish friend, Bolus Rakowski. He's Polish, and he has a great enemy who was also his friend. See, they were always competing. Was Geza Nemeth. Geza Nemeth was Hungarian. Now I learned how to speak Hungarian from Geza, and I learned how to speak Polish from Bolek, which is more properly pronounced in Polish. It's Bolek. So. It's a very exciting thing when you learn that people around you have talents that are unusual. Bolus, the reason I brought Bolus up, Bolus was the greatest knuckle cracker I ever knew. He could crack a full octave. He could get a full octave sound. Now that's pretty fantastic. That's 8 notes. And Bolus used to sit there and crack his knuckles, and he would crack them in all different ways. And then he would crack them in rhythm. He could crack them, say, to the Washington Post March. And I always envied this, because I never had any of that talent. I could not do this. Any of the simple, basic folk bodily talents eluded me. Schwartz, on the other hand, had a fantastic talent, which I cannot discuss on the air, but his talent was exceedingly spectacular. He could be heard a block and a half sometimes in a high wind, and so Schwartz had his talents too, and we used to compete in these various things. Look at that! Look what Lee is doing. Where did you learn that? That's fantastic. I can't do it. What do you mean? You pull a thumb back like that? What's this? I can't do that. You can touch your wrist with your thumb? No way, I couldn't do that. If I tried that, I'd bust my hand off. Now, that's what I mean. See, now, that's a folk talent. You're born with that. Now, but, wait a minute. You haven't heard anything. My father used to make my mother flip. She used to just absolutely hide her head under the pillow and scream, I can't look, oh, stop! Whenever he wanted to really needle everybody, he was really, giving them the business, like at a party or something like this, he would holler like this. He'd say, hey, you guys, watch this! And my mother would say, no, don't do that. He says, watch this. And he would take off his coat, and he would flip his arms back. He had double-jointed shoulders. If you've ever seen a guy with double-jointed shoulders, it looks like he's been run over by a truck. And his arms are hanging limply behind him. It's fantastic sight. My mother, no, stop, I can't fall. Oh. And he'd walk around, and he would pretend he's been hit by a train or something. And the people are yelling and hollering. Now, that's folk talent. He would really make it big on a talk show, doing that. Watch my shoulders. Well, now, this kind of talent is not to be put down. Another great talent. Bolus could snap he'd make his knuckles crack. Now, Geza Nemeth had his talent. You want to know what Geza Nemeth's talent was? And it used to bug Bolek, because these two would be constantly competing. Geza Nemeth was the best. Well, I don't know how to say this. As I said, there are some elements in the show that definitely are not in good taste. I concede, but you're just going to have to go along with this. Geza Nemeth was the most creative, accurate spitter I ever saw. He was not only accurate, but he got tremendous distance. Now, have you ever watched? There's one ball player. Now, I'll tell you who he is. You ever see Bernie Allen play ball? Bernie Allen spits like Nemeth, like Geza Nemeth did. Now, how do they spit? Well, they manage to get the juice into a neat little round wad about the size of a big BB. Now with me it doesn't work like whoop, all over the front of the shirt and everything. See, but with a guy like Bernie Allen or with Geza Nemeth, he'd go like that, and it's just a little shot. It goes like a BB, zap, goes maybe 30 feet. Fantastic, like a bam. Well, he used to walk along, and we'd be walking along the street, see, me and Flick and Schwartz, Nemeth and Bolus, and he would just show off, You'd see a dog walking past, you go, like, bam, right between the eyes. And the dog, it's pretty... and it used to really bug Bolus, because Bolus always tried to do it. And he'd go like that, and it'd bounce off his chin, down into his collar. And Nemeth would say, look, you get your tongue, you make it like with the tongue, you use your tongue like this. Now watch, I'll do it slowly. And zap, 30 feet. I just never, some guys got it and some ain't. Now, I shouldn't tell you some of these other talents. There were other talents that we used to, these are true folk competitions that we used to indulge in. One of the most exciting is gum snapping. Now, I can snap gum with the all-time greats. I can. I'm serious. The only talent that I could beat anybody with was gum snapping, and if I had some gum here tonight, I would show you, although it would be dangerous. I don't have any with me. If I did have gum here, I would show you what true gum snapping is like. Not only can I snap gum to get that real hard, biting whap, it goes like that, but it has a sting and a bite, and control is important in snapping a gum. Now, further than this is important too in gum snapping, is you to be able to do it in rapid succession. Now, it takes some people like 15 minutes to get the gum right and their mouth right to snap, and then it goes plop. This kind of stuff. I hate to see amateurs messing around in a field that they shouldn't mess around in. But when you really snap gum well, I can go pop, 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 right? You heard me do that. And I can shatter windows at 20 feet. Well, and by the way, another thing. The worst kind of gum to use for gum snapping is bubble gum. The amateur, you can always tell the amateur he tries it with bubble gum. No good. Bubble gum, the consistency of bubble gum is made to blow bubbles with, not to snap. It's very different. That's like trying to use hockey skates to do speed skating. You're not gonna mess around. You gotta have the right equipment. So I would suggest one of the best gums to use for snapping is T-Berry's gum. Now, you can't get that very often. It's an esoteric gum, but I want to tell you, baby, you'll knock guys' glasses right off their heads at 40 feet with your pop, and you got to get that move. Now, that was the only thing I could do, but I could tell you some of the other great performers that I knew in various folk arts. This is a little sensitive, a little delicate here, but I know how quite to say this, but they're I better not. That certain talents. We used to go back of the garage, especially when there was snow, and we used to, me and Schwartz and Flick and Bruner, and it takes great muscular control. Is where this one comes into. And I never saw anything like the time that Schwartz, I'm serious, Schwartz was melting ice on the roof of the garage. Now that is a fantastic performance. And he wrote his name on the roof. Now I've seen great performances where I just don't know why I'm bringing out all these folk talents. But I told you early in the show, that there would be certain elements in the show that you may find disagreeable. But we've got to lay it all out. We've got to say it like it is, sometimes. And I'm just recognizing talents that are hardly ever recognized. And let's come right out and say it. Radio's grown up. We can talk about a few of these things. And I remember the afternoon that it occurred. It was immediately following a good snowstorm. And there were about 6-7 inches of snow all over the ground and up on the on the garage up there. So we were back of the garage, and Bolus, of course, was always trying everything. Bolus says, "Watch this," and and so everybody's okay. Bolus is pretty good, but then Schwartz says, "Watch this," and zap, and we could not believe it. It was fantastic. What's worse, it was in about a 20-mile-an-hour wind. He not only had control, he had power, man. And so these talents are not to be disdained. Now, I saw though. Speaking of, I have a letter here. You know, you think I'm inventing this? Listen to this one now. Now, listen carefully, you guys. This is a letter from a woman who spends a great deal of time. If you think I'm making this stuff up, look at this. Here's a woman who spends a great deal of time in the upper Amazon. You remember a couple of months back I did a show on the time that I spent in the upper Amazon. I've been up in there. And she says, I'm fascinated with the things you say. She says, you're correct in everything you say about the tribe that you were with, the Shaparas and so on. She says, however, have you ever run into the Colinas Indians? She says, they live far to the south on the Peruvian Purus, near where it crosses the border into Brazil. That's a river, by the way. The men line up. Now here's a typical example of folk competition. It's very much in the same line. The men line up, and each in turn swallows a mixture of the local brew, euphemistically described by some anthropologists as, quote, a sort of beer. The contestant has to gulp down a big gourdful. You know, they have it in gourds. He gulps it down and then throws it up forcefully. The guy who throws it the furthest wins. So now that's an Erping contest. Now I'm not making this up. I'm just telling you these are basic games that people do play. They compete. Whop! You know, and he's, oh my God, look at him. Fantastic. But they also play another little game of whipping each other with ceremonial whips. So the Indians really know what they're doing. Now, that's another game. But now I'll tell you, we see games spring out of basic competition. Now I don't know. I think that the male may be a little more that way than the female. I will make no judgments on this, but it just seems to me that the male is continually involving in competitions, whereas the female may do it occasionally. The male, it's a continual thing. Now I'll show you how a typical game opened up one day. These things just happen. We for some reason or other, this crowd that I was with when I was a kid, me and Schwartz and Bolus and Bruner and Flick, we took to eating our lunch. Now I can't explain this. Can any of you explain this? Any social commentators out there that most of the kids in a school will do the same things. You agree with that, Liz? Most of the kids will do the same thing. In other words, if they have a cafeteria in the school, most of the kids will eat lunch in the cafeteria. Do you agree with that? Okay. Now, on the other hand, if, let's say, they have a basketball game, most of the kids will go to it. But why do certain kids are not in this? Now, for this, here's an example. Now, we had a great big cafeteria in our high school, a huge cafeteria, and it was about a half a block square. Now, I was given money to eat in the cafeteria every day. But for some crazy reason, Schwartz and Flick and Bruder and myself took, and this is in cold weather, I mean, it's like 0. We took to eating our lunch out in back of the garage, which is back of the school. Now, what would our lunch be? Well, we would go across the street to John's, which was a delicatessen across the street, and we would buy ourselves a couple of Twinkies and an ice cream cone in the middle of the winter and go out. That would be our lunch. Now, we would all stand around in this cold garage with the wind. Why this garage? I don't know. With the wind blowing like hell, and all the other kids are sitting down in the cafeteria, and they're doing what kids do. Hey, Howie, and this kind of stuff. And we're in the garage eating our lunch. Well, out of this garage scene sprang several very complicated games. The garage had concrete walls, with cinder block walls, concrete bricks, rather, concrete block walls. See, up they go. Well, we're standing in this cold garage. Without any warning, one day, Flick takes a run at the wall with his lunch. So he takes a run at the wall and jumps up and kicks his foot against the wall. It's about 3-4 feet up. He just takes a kick, see? And you can see his heel mark. Well, at that, Schwartz then says, "Watch me!" And he takes a run, and he flies up in the air, he kicks, and there's a kick mark, a heel mark about 6 inches higher than Flick's. Flick says, "Oh, well, wait a minute. You started all the way back by the door. You ran further. Wait. I'm going to start by the door now. I'm going to start by the door now. Watch this. And he runs like hell. He jumps up. Bam! He kicks. Now his kick is about 7 or 8 inches higher than Schwartz's. Well, at which point I got into the act. I'm standing there with my Twinkie in my hand. So I go back. Now we've already got the rules. See how rules evolve? The rule says you start from where the door is, where the door jam is. You start there. You can't run back further than that or closer than that. You start with the door jam in. So I go back to the door, and I run like mad, and I leap, and I make a big kick. I'm about 1.5 inches higher than Flick. So Flick says, oh, wait a minute now, come on. He says, oh, wait, you're starting over by the other side of the garage. You got to start over the left side. See, I got a bigger, longer run because I ran diagonally. At which point Flick says, well, if you're going to start over there, okay. So he goes back. Now the rules are getting very, very, you notice they're getting very refined now. You don't start just by the door. You start by the right side of the door and cut across the floor diagonally, which gives you another foot of running. So Flick runs back and he says, okay, watch this now. Well, Flick puts his foot down by the door jamb and he starts to move like a shot and he goes, he kicks, boom. Oh, fantastic kick, about 6 feet off the ground. Well, he falls heavily back down to the ground and he says, okay, try that one. Well, all the while, Bolus has been saying nothing. Bolus is about 6 inches shorter than the rest of us. He was built like a fire plug with feet, and yeah, he was squat. He had bulging muscles on his shoulders, a thick neck. And Bolus was a born, guaranteed, absolutely born fullback. So Bolus is watching this scene. He's saying nothing. He was a laconic type. And so Bolus, without saying a word, he's got his lunch in a big sack. So Bolus walks back to the line, and it was at that point that I saw one of the great athletic performances. If this kind of stuff had been harnessed and put into the Olympics, God knows how far it could have gone. There are you see the natural athlete. That's what Bolus was. Natural, pure. Anything he did great. For Bolus puts his head down, just like he played football, and he runs across the garage. His feet go gung, 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 and he runs. He's picking up feet, gung, 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 and he left his feet. Fantastic! I couldn't believe it. His feet go up out from under him, both of them. He is now vertical. His head is down, his feet are up, and he goes, boom! He kicks the ceiling. He kicks the ceiling. It's about 6 inches right below the roof, and he falls back. Pow! He falls back on the back of his neck. His lunch goes all over the floor. Here goes the Polish bread, the salami, the kielbasa, all of it. So he goes all over the floor. And we just stood there. My God Almighty, what a kick! Well, from that minute on, I mean, it was a whole new attitude towards Bolus, because Bolus had performed far and above and beyond the call of athletic duty. He really kicked. Now, you know that to this day, in that garage back of the school, there's a heel mark. It's a black skidding heel mark right under the ceiling. And I have seen it since. You remember the day I went over and looked at it? There it is. I saw it since. That Bolus's great effort still remains. And I wonder how many kids have gone through that garage and do not realize they're on historic ground. Do not realize that heel up there represents like Babe Ruth's 714th home run. That's where it went. He really booted one. Now, I'll tell you another great talent. Farkas. You've heard me talk of Scott Farkas before? Scott Farkas' talent was hitting guys. Farkas... I mean, I never saw anything like it. I saw Farkas, because that was his basic activity, really. He was talented. He was very good at it. We've all known, the males, again, more than females, I suspect, have all known in every school there's one guy who's really a tough son of a gun, and he likes to do it. And he would hit. Farkas had a punch that would travel about 6 inches, and I'm telling you, would knock a hole in a brick wall. He just hit you, without warning sometimes. He'd just come up and bam, right in the eye. Well, now, this was his activity, but he had a talent. Even the most animalistic of us have another side. And Scott Farkas could take a pencil. Lee, are you listening? I want you to make this note. Scott Farkas could take a pencil, lay it across his teeth. Now, all of us can play music across our teeth with a pencil, right? Oh, no. Farkas played music. It's a big difference. And Scott Farkas... And by the way, Farkas once got thrown out of an auditorium session for doing that. Yes, we had a recital. You know how from time to time the school orchestra was up on the stage, struggling its way through pomp and circumstance and the overture to Norma, and Farkas is about 9 rows back with his pencil, playing a far greater overture to Norma, or far greater pomp and circumstances than was going up on the stage. And you could hear him all over the auditorium. He's going away there. He gets it. And finally, Miss Robinette got up and grabbed him by the back of the neck and simply threw him out in the hall with his pencil going full blast. Well, now, this was a talent, and a good one. Well, all right, I'll tell you one talent that my brother, again, my brother has a majestic talent. Again, it's one of those talents that borders upon, if you're squeamish, it borders upon ill taste. My brother can take a quart of buttermilk. He would open the container, and he would say, "Watch this." A dead silence would fall, and he takes the container of buttermilk. He raises it after taking a breath, preparing himself. He sort of hunches his shoulders a little bit, tilts his head back, and now listen to this, Elizabeth, without swallowing, would pour the entire quart of buttermilk into his trap. Now try that on for size. And then he would get the buttermilk, and then it's now down in his gut, or down in him, whatever it is. He hasn't swallowed it. The buttermilk is now in, and then he waves, and then he goes... Fantastic trick. He could drink an entire quart of buttermilk in one swell swoop. Just like that. Fantastic. Now, how do you like that trick? After which, now listen to what he would do. He would polish it off with this majestic performance. He would swallow the buttermilk right down, the entire quart. He would stand there for a second, everybody's waiting, and then he would go, "Wow." The most spectacular burp. Do you know that he can burp the entire national anthem? He has control. Fantastic. Now, these are all folk talents, which I deplore them. Now, no, wait, I'm going to go on record. Don't send me a letter immediately saying that was an awful case. I deplore them. I agree with you. They're awful. I mean, the idea of Indians standing around throwing up beer, that's sickening. I agree. The idea of my brother drinking a whole quart of buttermilk and then going, "Wow, this is sickening." The idea of Schwartz writing his name on a roof, believe me, I am against this. I agree with you. It is terrible. And sometimes I deplore being part of a race that does stuff like that. You never see squirrels doing that. You will never see a moose walking up to the side of a garage and saying to another moose, "What's this?" No way. It's only man that has that kind of depravity. And that tonight we have taken the opportunity to salute this type of athletic endeavor. I'll bet there's 45 guys out there now trying it with the buttermilk. One warning, though, if you don't know how to do it, you're liable to drown. I could see them, bringing you into Bellevue, and they say, "I don't know, he drowned in the buttermilk." I don't know. So be careful. These are dangerous things. This is WOR New York. Stay tuned for In Conversation.